Hello, fellow Packer fans. Welcome into another episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. And of course, if you haven't done so already, what the heck are you waiting for? Make sure you never miss anything Pack a Day podcast related and hit that subscribe button. Also hit that little notification button to make sure you get a notification every time there is new content available here on our channel. Today is one of my favorite episodes to do, and I know we are sitting here on June 10th, 2023, and we are just about to kick off this, we're still a ways away from kicking off the 2023 season. We're 3 months away from that first game, but it seems like we're getting there. Mini camps next week. Before you know, it's going to be training camp, and then it's full steam ahead from there. But we still have a full 2023 to play out, and this is going to be a crazy, chaotic season. We don't know if it's going to be really bad. We don't know if it's going to be really, really good, something in between. We have no idea. But what I want to do today is fast forward over all of that and take a look really quick at what 2024 looks like. Now, I'm not obviously going to dig into everything and every bit of minutia and what, free agent possibilities there could be or anything like that. But what I want to look at is the base of this team. All right. So if they don't sign any of their own free agents back, if they don't sign any, outstanding free agents or any free agents that are out in the market, if they don't draft anybody, if they don't do anything, what does the base of this roster look like in 2024? So let's go position by position and just sort of piece together what the, sort of crux of this team could look like this next season. So first of all, we have quarterback, and Jordan Love will still be under contract in 2024. And then likely Sean Clifford makes the team in 2023 in some capacity. I wasn't able to lock him in my lead pipe lock segment, but he's as close as you can possibly get. 5th round pick. We know that, Brian does not like releasing his draft choices. So Sean very likely to make the team this year, and if that's the case, he will be under contract as we head into next year as well. So Jordan Love, Sean Clifford, the two quarterbacks that will likely be under contract heading into 2024. Running back is a much more interesting situation. So you have Aaron Jones under contract. Lou Nichols, if he makes the team, would also be under contract. And then Tyler Goodson, if he made the team, would be an exclusive rights free agent. The issue here is that it's probably either Lou Nichols or Tyler Goodson making the roster. Now, as the season goes on, they could potentially both end up on the 53, but it could very well be one or the other. The more difficult and more challenging question here is regarding Aaron Jones. So Jones technically under contract, but they could save up to $12 million next year by releasing him with a June 1st designation. So there is some serious salary cap implications and a serious salary cap decision that they are going to have to make on Aaron Jones. So as of right now, he is set to be under contract in 2024 and will be on the roster, but a lot could change between now and the beginning of 2024. Lou Nichols maybe makes the team, maybe doesn't. Tyler Goodson maybe makes the team, maybe doesn't. They would both, Nichols would be under contract, Goodson an exclusive rights free agent, which is basically a team option for a bare minimum deal. So that's basically under contract. So that is a much more interesting position. AJ Dillon will be an unrestricted free agent. So I'm not sure there's much we can look at there and say with any level of certainty that any of those guys will necessarily be there in 2024 under contract. Jones will start that way. Whether he ends that way will remain to be seen. They could work out another restructure. Lou Nichols, Tyler Goodson, maybe they make the roster, but those are going to have to be a little bit more of a wait and see type situation. Wide receiver is the exact opposite of running back. Completely cut and dry. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Samori Toure, Dontavian Wicks, Grant Dubose, all under contract. So assuming those 6 do end up making the 53-man roster, and really the only question is probably Grant Dubose at this point. If they all make it, they will all be under contract going into next season, and those would be your, leaders in the clubhouse to at least start 2024 as the 6 wide receivers under contract and on the roster. So Watson, Doubs, Reed, Toure, Wicks, and Dubose all would be under contract. Again, assuming Wicks and Dubose and Toure make the 53 this year, which in all likelihood they probably will. Dubose maybe being the biggest question mark there. At tight end, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft will both be under contract in 2024. Josiah DeGuara and Tyler Davis would both be unrestricted free agents. So they still have those 2 young players in Musgrave and Kraft, but would probably have to build things out a little bit after that. Maybe look at re-signing DeGuara. That would be determined based on how he plays this upcoming season. Offensive tackle, another interesting one, David Bakhtiari. We'll talk more about him in just a second, but he is technically under contract for 2024. Zach Tom is. And then you sort of have the Caleb Jones, Rasheed Walker, Luke Tenuta trio. If any of them make the roster, they would basically be under contract. Both Rasheed Walker and Luke Tenuta will be under contract in 2024 if they make the team this year. Caleb Jones would be an exclusive rights free agent. And as I mentioned with Tyler Goodson, that is just a team option for a super cheap deal. So for all intents and purposes, that is under contract for Caleb Jones as well. The question marks here, Yash will be an unrestricted free agent, and David Bakhtiari will have up to $20 million in savings if they release him or trade him next offseason. So that is going to be another huge question mark. They could do a restructure there as well. David Bakhtiari could maybe get a little bit more involved in maybe wanting to find his way out and with a more veteran team. That's within the realm of possibility, but that will be another big question mark. Then it just becomes, all right, out of Caleb Jones, Rasheed Walker, Luke Tenuta, who ultimately makes the team, and then you've got Zach Tom. The question there will be, is he a tackle or is he going to be playing somewhere else? And then Yash will be an unrestricted free agent as well. At guard, Elton Jenkins, Royce Newman, Sean Ryan, all would be under contract. Royce Newman and Sean Ryan will have to fight it out this year for a roster spot. There's a chance both make it. There's a chance either could get cut. But if they make it, they'll have, a roster. Well, they'll have a contract next year, and then Green Bay will have, I'm sure, competition for both of those players as well. But Jenkins, Newman, and Ryan under contract for 2024. And then center, you have Josh Myers under contract. Jake Hansen would be a restricted free agent, which would basically mean they would not tender him, which would likely mean he becomes an unrestricted free agent. You also have John Runyon Jr. at guard, who would be an unrestricted free agent as well. All right, along the defensive line, you have Kenny Clark, who would be under contract, Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, and Jonathan Ford. So basically that entire group of defensive linemen are under contract. Now, Clark has a lot of the same questions as some of those other veterans like Aaron Jones and David Bakhtiari. Clark would have up to $17 million in savings with a post-June 1st release or trade. So there is some opportunity that if Green Bay wanted to potentially go in a different direction, if Clark had a worse season than he had a season ago, that could be at least within the realm of discussion. But as of right now, Clark, Wyatt, Slayton, Wooden, Brooks, and Ford all under contract for 2024. Edge, Preston Smith finds himself in the same situation as the other veterans. Does Green Bay want to keep him under contract? But then after that, you have Luke Van Ness, Kingsley Keke, maybe a Brenton Cox if you were to make the roster. With Preston Smith, you've got $12.4 million in savings and potential savings if they would release him with a June 1st designation. So that will be a question mark that they have to answer with Preston Smith as well. And then you have Rashawn Gary, who I expect to get a contract done sooner rather than later in some form of extension. But as I record this today, he is technically an unrestricted free agent. And if we're just doing this exercise as any free agents would be gone, then right now Rashawn Gary would be gone on this list. But I assume that something will get done probably sooner rather than later, but even if not, I very much expect him to be a Packer in 2024. All right, linebacker, Devondre Campbell, same sort of question, $10.75 million potential savings if they were to release him next season with a June 1st designation, possibly a restructure there as well. Then you have Quay Walker, and then you have Isaiah McDuffie and Tariq Carpenter. If either of those players make the roster this year, they would be under contract next year as well. Corner, you've got Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, Carrington Valentine, Shamar Jean-Charles if he makes the roster. Rasul Douglas, the same sort of veteran question mark. Now, he's not a June 1st designation, but if they were to release him next year, Green Bay would have $6.5 million in savings. So there's a lot of savings there if they would want to move on from him next year. So you can't lock him in, but Jair, Rasul, Stokes, Valentine, and SJC technically all under contract. You would have Keyshawn Nixon as a unrestricted free agent. At safety, you're very bare. You've got Anthony Johnson Jr. at safety, who would be under contract, assuming he makes the roster this year. And then you've got Ennis Gaines, who would be an exclusive rights free agent, again, if you were to make the roster this year. All of your Dallin Levitt's, Rudy Fords, Jonathan Owens, Tavarius Moore, all of those guys, one-year deals. And Darnell Savage will be an unrestricted free agent. So the safety cupboard is going to be pretty freaking bare if they don't make some sort of change there. And it could just be Anthony Johnson Jr. It could easily just be Anthony Johnson Jr. Ennis Gaines may not even be there. So it could just be one, two, maybe neither of those guys. Maybe neither make the roster. Maybe both get claimed elsewhere. That safety room is looking a little bit, frail and fragile at the moment. So that is an interesting one. At kicker, if Anders Carlson were to make it, which at this point is very likely, Bakhtiari, he would be under contract. At punter, Pat O'Donnell, free agent, but Daniel Whelan, if he were to make the roster, he would be under contract. And then either of the long snappers, whether it's Matt Orzik or Broughton Hatcher, either of those guys would be under contract, whichever one ends up making the roster. So what ends up happening is you have a lot of big-time contract decisions. Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, Devondre Campbell, and Rasul Douglas. 6 key veterans for this Packers team will have roster decisions next year where Green Bay is going to have to decide, do we want to keep those players with exorbitant salaries? Do we want to do a restructure and use some void years and push things out again? Do we want to move on and start ripping that Band-Aid and getting a little bit more fiscally responsible? Those 6 players, Jones, Bakhtiari, Clark, Smith, Campbell, and Douglas, are going to be really interesting question marks going into 2024. They'll also have some key unrestricted free agents. A.J. Dillon, Josiah DeGuara, John Runyon Jr., Yosh Nijman, Rashawn Gary, Keyshawn Nixon, basically their entire safety group, and then Pat O'Donnell as well. So they've got a lot of free agent decisions. They got a lot of veteran decisions that they're going to have to make. Now, if we were to boil that all down to the lowest common denominator and say, which players am I fairly confident that they're going to be going into, even if we, take out some of those players who have some interesting roster decisions, at quarterback, you've got Jordan Love, probably Sean Clifford. At running back, I can't really say anyone for sure because of that Aaron Jones contract. Lou Nichols maybe doesn't make the team. Tyler Goodson doesn't make the team. So at running back, I can't say anyone for sure. Wide receiver, Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Toure, Wicks, maybe Grant Dubose if he makes the roster. Tight end, Musgrave, Kraft. Offensive tackle, Zach Tom. Maybe one of the trio or two of the trio of Caleb Jones, Rasheed Walker, and Luke Tenuta, depending on who makes the team this year. Elton Jenkins at guard, Josh Myers at center, Wyatt Slayton, Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks along the defensive line. In all likelihood, Rashawn Gary at edge. I can't imagine him not being there. Luke Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare at edge as well. Quay Walker at inside linebacker, Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, and Carrington Valentine, Anthony Johnson Jr. at safety, Anders Carlson at kicker, and whichever long snapper ends up making it at long snapper. So it's a little bit bare bones, and like I said, some key decisions with unrestricted free agents. There's also going to be some key decisions, with a lot of their veteran players. It's going to be a very interesting offseason in 2024. But let's also not forget that on top of that, they're going to have some pretty decent draft capital as well. They're going to get either a first or second round pick in the trade for Aaron Rodgers, which is going to be huge for this young team. They're also expected to pick up a 4th round pick and 2 6th round picks in the compensatory picks. So they are picking up likely 4 additional draft picks, and they still have their entire, first 7 picks in the draft as well. The all 7 rounds, they haven't traded anything away. So they're projected to have 11 draft picks next year, including 2 firsts, a second, a third, 2 fourths, a 5th, 2 sixths, and a 7th, which would be a lot of draft capital for Brian Gutekunst to continue to build this team with a lot of young talent. So an interesting roster going into 2024. A lot of really difficult decisions with some of those veterans. You've got Jordan Love with this whole, plethora of wide receivers with Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Toure, etc. Musgrave and Kraft at tight end. Offensive line, very interesting with Elton Jenkins likely leading the way. Wyatt Slayton, Wooden, Brooks along the defensive line, Gary Van Ness and Enagbare at edge, Quay at inside linebacker, Jair Stokes and Valentine at corner, Anthony Johnson Jr. at safety, and Anders Carlson at kicker. Clearly, some of those veterans will be back. Clearly, some of those unrestricted free agents will be back. It's just very tough to say at this point which one from which group will ultimately end up making the Packers roster in 2024. But if you were to strip it all down and just bare bones it and see exactly what is going to be there almost for sure, the players that we just went over is what you're looking at, with probably a couple of those other free agents, veterans, and obviously 11 draft picks to help them out as well. That is going to do it for me today. Nice, quick, easy episode for you this weekend. Hope you really enjoy it. I always love looking ahead to the 2024, to the next year's roster. Even though we've got a full season ahead of us, it's always interesting to see what's ahead and look a little bit forward. So hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.